Okay, so this is SIG Network Policy API sub-project meeting. Today is March 1st. This is an official CNCF meeting, so we expect everyone to follow the code of conduct and be nice with each other. So when we are getting started today we have the meeting notes. The meeting agenda is pretty short, and we don't have a lot of folks here, so we can just get started. If someone wants to enter any other item to be discussed, please be my guest. Okay, so the first item of the agenda is an issue triage. We've been doing this since the last meeting, and I guess this is good, so we can actually take a look into what's going on, if we have any new user story, or at least some problem with what has been proposed. And we have 34 open issues, but let me put a label here. It's triage and no one assigned. Yeah, so we have these 5 issues to be triaged. The first one is from a meme, which is to add the end-to-end test for port range that I've asked him to open this. I mean, do you wanna take care of this? Do you want me to take care of this?
Yeah, I can take care of this. We can start with the API integrations. We have one part for the APIs only, and as we get these in Calico, we test the actual code.
Okay, so I'm gonna assign that to you.
Okay.
I may accept also the triage, right? Because we know that this is needed. So the next one, pod probes lead to blind SSRF from the node. Pod probe, this is from Howard John. A pod probe can be configured to send readiness probes to arbitrary destinations, including localhost. This is similar to blah, 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 blah. Because coming from the node, we can also get access to internal pods running. Oh, okay. Okay, so Antonio is already on this one, but yeah, I guess this might be somehow some sort, this can turn into somehow some sort of user story for us, like blocking network policy, blocking the requests also from the node. But I don't know if we wanna take this, specifically this issue, as a feature request. What do you think, folks?
Hey, everybody, I just joined, just saying hi.
Hey, what's up, Jay? So we are triaging issues, and this one is one that you can actually use the node readiness and liveness probes to somehow attack the pod. Like this one, they can use the readiness probe to trigger some action into Google or AWS Metadata Server. And so it's not quite related to our work here, but this falls again into the node selector case, because you could have you could have, as an example, a network policy not allowing any traffic from the node, even if this is like a liveness or a readiness probe, or you just allowing liveness or readiness probes from the node to the pod specific port, like 8080, and not like an admin port from Java. But I don't know if we wanna use this issue specifically to propose, okay, we think that we should have some somehow a node selector network policy. What do you think, Jay? Don't
He
leave me
doesn't
talking
want the
alone.
pod. He doesn't want that probe. He wants to lock down the probe. And you're saying that's a node policy. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, they are using like the readiness probe, like node triggering the metadata infrastructure. But there is another example. Other possible targets are local host endpoints, etcd metrics. Like you can put this in readiness probe and you can trigger something in readiness in etcd metrics.
I think it's by definition, of course, of the network policy API right now that this is not something that is enforced by network policy. So that's incorrect that it's bypassing network policy restrictions. Because if you actually look in the types.go, it'll say all traffic is allowed from the node. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like this is issue as stated is wrong, but it's like a really cool idea that we've talked about before. So
Okay.
I feel like we should kind of, I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's two things happening in this issue. One is they're saying that they're subverting network policy. That's not the case. But they're also saying it'd be great if network policy supported this, and that's valid. So I feel like we should encourage them to, who's working on node policies?
Can't remember.
Is it Abhishek or is that different? That's cluster scope, huh? Did we just totally forget about node policies like entirely? Like I thought it was a thing. Like I thought it was something we were doing.
Yeah, it seems so.
Is anybody here interested in researching this topic of node-based network policies? I mean, I think it's super important and I think it's going to be a hot topic, but I don't think anybody is working on it right now.
Yeah, node policy has no there is a mark. Yeah, nobody. Yeah. But what about Abhishek point from cluster scoped policy? Because this is also a thing. Like can I use the cluster scoped policy to at least protect my local host endpoints, right? Like the metrics from etcd, or maybe calling some, I don't know, like blocking my probes to call something like that it shouldn't call.
Also in general, like, would it make sense to have like node-based policies for namespace network policies? I think we can use only we can use cluster network policies only for node, like for selecting nodes as such. Because for namespace network policies, it may be a little bit confusing to have node selector because nodes are cluster scope, right? So probably we can use cluster network policy for like defining like node based network policies.
Sounds an idea for me.
I mean, but I think we still have to have node selector in the peers, like ingress peer or egress peer for network policies, because um, the target can be a pod, but the destination can be a node. So you can still have it in ingress or egress peer, but for selecting as a target, I think only cluster network policy is the candidate. I mean, just my thought process. But,
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so I will leave this one separated for, like, we can probably go and discuss about this one later as part of the meeting today, instead of me ranting about the V2 versus new network policy spec. Okay, so the next one, let me close this. Yeah. And the next one is how to allow access to Kubernetes API using egress network policy. That I guess we pass it through this one, the last one, right?
There's just not enough details in here. I looked at it. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like what do they mean by Kubernetes API? I don't know. I assume they mean some endpoint or something. And then you can see that, like, if you look at their policy, like they have a super specific IP block, and then their solution is to use like an anything IP block, you know? So like whatever problem they have, they didn't really explain it, and I don't think they really understood it either. You know, they just did like an allow all. Look at that policy down there, right? Like something /0. That's just gonna allow everything, right?
Yeah. Maybe I'm wondering if the question here is like wanting to target the service Kubernetes, you know, the IP ending in 1, because it's a like 1096.01/32, but when the user does this, it's not quite targeting to the service, but to the endpoints, because this is like a service IP, so probably it's getting blocked.
Yeah. I'm happy to follow up on this one if nobody else wants to. I don't really expect that there'll be anything that comes out of it. I think it's just like a, you know, they probably just need to learn a little bit about network policies or something. But yeah, I mean, like, feel free to assign it to me.
Thank you, man. Okay. And okay, the last ones, they are about Windows conformancy. So I can assign this to you, right, Jay? I don't need to be just assigned to you. Windows.
That's me.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And yeah, Adelina and a lot of it. Yeah, feel free to assign me if no one else.
I don't know. I didn't read the description, so I don't know if this is something to you. But do you want to take a look into this one?
Yeah, I'm working on this.
Okay. Yeah.
Really a big. Yeah, it's outside of network policy, but that's part of it, and I'm working on that part. And Amin is helping me to test that stuff.
Okay, so this is assigned to you, Jay.
Okay.
And the last one. Restart Kubernetes nodes not ready because blah 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 blah. Network policy. There is no network policy here, so I don't think we need to. I don't know why this GitHub search didn't work. Okay, so we finished this issue triage. So we have more 2 items in the agenda. The first one is to better discuss about this host, this node selector and cluster scoped network policy selector thing, which I think it's also going to be something nice to propose and compete. And I've put from the last meeting about the V2, the discussion about network policy V2 versus new network policy spec inside the V1.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you need? What do you want to do next, folks? Because to me, I guess this one is pretty hard to discuss, and also I am thinking about, before discussing here, sending like to SIG network mailing list and saying, okay, why is there a reason why we shouldn't do this way or that way, so they can like throw everything on us and we can make some proper discussion better. And I guess this one is something that we should probably discuss right now. Sounds good? Okay, so yeah, about this issue. So we all agree that the cluster scoped network policy should be used to target the destination, right, Satish? No, when the origin is.
So I think for both ingress and egress, right? I mean, but the target is node.
Okay. is node. Network policy can be used if, okay, in the case of network policy, just if it's
The
an
node,
egress.
yeah,
Okay.
if the node is an ingress or egress peer. The target is a pod, set of pods, but the node is a peer. Pod or pod selector.
But the origin is hello. The peer, right? Okay. But what's the difference between the cluster scope, the idea of the cluster scope, the network policy, and the network policy to protect this one, Satish? What do you think about that?
So I think the difference is like, so like nodes does not have any namespaces, right? I mean, network policy is like protecting a particular namespace, but I think cluster names, like cluster scope network policies are like more for the entire cluster. So like nodes are like cluster resources. So probably it would make sense to include in the cluster network policy itself. And also I would feel like the second item, like the network policy, like adding an API to allow node as a peer, I think we can still achieve it using cluster scoped network policy. But the idea is like to make it simplified. Like, I mean, like if I'm a developer and if I'm writing network policies to a particular namespace, I want all the policies related to that namespace in a single object. So that's the only use case I see where you want to have node as a peer. But other than that, I think cluster network policy in itself would be sufficient to cover all the node associated network policies, in my opinion.
Okay, got it. So maybe in the first case, we could use the cluster scope network policy to block any egress to the API, to the metadata server as an example, right? From Kubernetes to the metadata server.
Did Abhishek ever mention this in his?
I can't remember about that, Jay, if he did or not. So Yang is here, so
Yang is here.
Yeah, I think for the cluster network policy proposal we're doing right now, for the initial cap we opened, I think we didn't put node selector or those kind of things into the scope for the first iteration. It will be, otherwise it will be too much scope to include for the first cap. So we kind of like decided this could be a like follow up or individual cap by itself.
Do you all feel like maybe taking this on as an orthogonal part?
Yeah, I think I remember talking to Abhishek, and he said this could be a sort of like a orthogonal cap on its own.
Good. That way we just have a high level way to triage these issues, right? Into like, okay, we've kind of got an idea that now we can like point to you all. Cool. Does that make sense to everyone else, unless anyone else in this group wants to take this on? Like Yang can kind of lead that effort maybe with Avishek?
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. I think because me and Satish and Goban, who actually are actively working on the cluster network policy cap right now, we have a Thursday meetings. So I think we can bring this up this Thursday and discuss within the group on whether how we should move forward with this use case, and anyone else in the call who are interested in this, cool. Maybe we can.
I keep forgetting Satish is also and Gobind are also on that.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So okay, the four of you all are like the node people. Cool. Okay. So does anybody else want to help with this node stuff? I don't want to like discourage other people from owning it if they want to help. So I guess if not, then that's cool. We'll lean on you all for this stuff. This is great.
So I actually have a clarifying question on this. Can you explain a little bit more on targeting the metadata server, as in what that will mean?
Every cloud has those, right? Every cloud has a metadata server that has
this IP address,
like an internal IP, like an internal IP address that you can get all sorts of information from about the cloud.
I see.
And depending on the information that you have here, you might like download some sort of public key, or there are some folks that add some data in labels, and you can fetch this. So
gotcha, makes sense.
Do we know? Is that, I mean, so it's the metadata server, and I know it's a link local address, but is that actually on the node itself, or is there a network call that happens on the cloud provider side, but it's really an external resource you're calling? So would this be more defining external resources, or are these definitely, it runs on that same node itself?
Okay, so from my knowledge about OpenStack, I don't know about the other cloud providers, but this exits actually the node. It doesn't run on the node. This is provided by the cloud provider. It runs on top of the stack.
So are we looking at then, like, these policies could be written not just against, because now we're looking external from the node itself. Like I get if we're trying to restrict a local IP that is on the node, but now could it be for any service like that? There was another ticket earlier where somebody was asking about the API service IP address. I mean, that's external to the node as well. I mean, would it fall in the same thing where you could have a selector that equals the API and then write policies around that? Or are we getting, I mean, is it getting further from being on the node itself to being now this is any external address can be defined as a selector?
I think from my point of view, I think I kind of like agree with what Satish just said. Is that you know, the thing is, we are here probably just trying to alter the scope of what the policy selects. So for the cluster network policy, even for the cluster network policy we're proposing right now, the scope it selects is only pods. So we can write some policies such as, you know, we want to allow the pods to egress to a IP address from out of the cluster. Now with the node policies, we wanted to sort of like apply the entire policy to a node, so that, you know, we don't care if it's pods on the node or whatnot. You know, for the node itself, we wanted to allow egress to a certain external IP. So I think that's the differentiating point here. I think so it is a little bit more, you know, from out of the Kubernetes cluster scope, whereas, you know, you're not actually applying this to some cluster resource inside the cluster, but you're applying to the entire node, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I think it makes, so basically we know the scope of the source, but what item it targets then is what is obviously flexible. But like you're saying, the first use case is going to be this metadata server, which is a well-known IP, right? Like, I mean, pretty much every cloud provider has this kind of system set up. So, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So I left this one to be discussed in the cluster scope and network policy meeting. Okay, yeah. So it's like, okay, we can see what can be done here. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay. The last item in the agenda, but I will trigger an email. I wanna first just check with you folks. It's about I guess we started to discuss this on the last meeting, but it's about if we should now, because of like we are hitting some walls in the proposals, like the service selector or the node selector or anything that inserts a new selector in the network policy. it hits a no-go because of the default behavior being default allow instead of default deny, right? So if I can't select anything, I default allow, and this has been also a past issue from Tim Hawking and other folks about like this being a problem in network policy. But as network policy has reached the V1, we cannot change the default behavior from the object. So I'm thinking about if we should start proposing a V2, which is almost the same object from the V1, but with the idea of explicit behavior, as Jay always says, that we need to make those behavior explicit, or if we should propose as a short path something like a network policy spec 2 inside the network policy v1 object, like having a network policy v1 and adding a new spec v2. But I guess this is going to make a lot of noise into the SIG. But I want to hear you first, folks, as we now have a little bit more time, about if we should move forward to the V2 proposal. And second, how can we move forward with the V2 proposal? Because I guess cluster scoped network policy should be a different object, but we still need to evolve the network policy object to something more secure by default also.
I think the best way to move forward with it would be to build a prototype based on CRDs that translates in somehow that translates 80% of the things that we care about into lower level network policies, and play with it. That's what I feel like, but I feel like this stuff, to get it right, we have to play with it. We have to build something. And I know Matt has done some work around that. He did something really ambitious. He tried to build a graph-based network policy API, and it was like really interesting. It didn't fully work out, but he got pretty close to something that would be pretty cool to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Matt, how far did that get, and why did you stop working on it?
I stopped because I got too far away from network policies, and so I couldn't translate back into existing network policies very easily anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and there was that thing you had, I think, with the ingress egress issue, where there was that weird issue you ran into where we apply policies at the ingress level. And so when you say from an egress perspective, one thing can't talk to another thing, like there's some kind of weird asymmetry you hit there, but that would be fixed by these cluster networks. That might be fixable to some extent by the cluster scoped policies. I don't know. It seems like after you have cluster scoped policies, though, you could start envisioning a new API that built on top of those. And then you could say, well, if this API was capable of expressing network policies in an easier, more user-friendly way, and all it did is generate V1 policies, then it seems like it would be a natural organic step to say, look, this works. Let's make it a part of the first class API. That's like my approach that it would be to it. The other approach is we could have a bunch of meetings like we do for everything else. So,
well, if there's something that I can do to help that out, to take that stuff that I built and like apply it somehow, or like put together a POC, or if somebody else wants to collaborate on that, I'm happy to do whatever there.
Well, those are the two options. So that's one option. Other people, what other approaches are there? Because I have a feeling, this whole thing of building a thing that generates network policies is not the only way to design an API. So what are the other approaches people would want to take? We could have another one of our subgroups like Yang and Satish and Abhishek's little group that works on that, or.
Before we jump into that, I actually have some questions about the V2 policies we're talking about here, because if we wanted to do a V2 for the new net pool, what do you think? What do you guys think? Is the problem? I shouldn't say problem, but what's something that can be improved from the current network policies? Is it something that we cannot express by now, or it's just the policy itself is confusing a lot of people, so that we need an easier way or more explicit way to write a policy for V2? What are the things we're trying to solve here, I guess, is my question. So based on based on the answer to that question, we're probably going to be more comfortable going from one option to another.
I think it's unifying the like Ricardo mentioned. So Ricardo's did a good job of framing this, right? It's like we've always talked about V2, but why do we really need it? And we always had this intuition that eventually we'd know when we needed it. And I think we now know that we need. Now we know that we need it or whatever, because we are thinking about service selectors and node selectors and all these other things, and we keep hitting these walls.
I
see. So I think the idea was, let's just bump around in the dark until we can't find our way, until we're really sure we can't find our way out of the room. And I think we finally have probed the boundaries of, like, we're kind of like in the deep space of network policies now, right? And there's just like ice and rocks floating around, and there's nothing left.
I have some
like,
pretty, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have some pretty concrete ideas about things that I would like to see in a certain way. It basically comes down to like orthogonality and how like there's all these features in there, but they don't really work too well with each other. And there's all kinds of corner cases and stuff like that. And things that you can use in some contexts, but not in other contexts. And it makes it, really hard to do things, even though like the raw functionality like kind of should be there. So I don't know, like, where is a good place for me to like capture those specific things that I'm thinking about. But with the stuff that I did on Cyclonis with like parsing network policy, like I had to deal with all of these things, and it was really hard. And at the end of the day, you're just like, wow, it definitely shouldn't be that hard because there's not that much stuff there. But because of all of those exceptions and exceptions on exceptions, it really obscures what I think is the core of what's going on with network policies. Sorry, I kind of went too far in depth on that. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
So from what I'm hearing, so there are two things here. If first one is that the syntax is a bit obscure, as Ricardo has put in here, and as Matt has mentioned. And the second thing is, when we were trying to evolve the API around the new things we're proposing, such as service selectors and node selectors, we wanted to have a way to, since we are proposing those anyways, right? We didn't want to sort of like disrupt the current structs, or having to deal with backward compatibility, those kind of things. So we probably wanted to propose a new set of API altogether. Does that capture this correctly?
Is that a question for me? Sorry.
Oh, no, I think it's for Jay, I guess.
It's for all of us.
Yeah.
The question for all of us. Yeah, I think that's a fair. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like,
first of all, go ahead, Jay.
I just want to make sure we stay broad before we like dig into like one of those weird like design sessions where we're, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and like think outside the box as much as possible, because right now we're in this rut of like trying to build a better API on top of an API that's fundamentally not what we want. And so I think we need to take people who've been around a long time doing this stuff, and then we need to take some people who've come at it from a different direction, and then we need to say like, what are the things we could do? Like, so one is we could do the CRD thing. The other thing is we could do go on. What were you going to suggest, Ricardo?
No, you are going to suggest. You say that we have two options, and you say only the build CRD, and then you forgot the other suggestion.
Well, we could do one of those community feedback things again, but I'm not a big fan of those. Of those. I think the community is right here. You know what I mean? And I think it's the people that are doing the work that I want to hear from.
I guess, like, leaving a little bit the subject, but justifying this, we've been doing this like for, I guess, 1 year, right? We've started this on the beginning of the pandemics. I remember when Jay called the group, I guess was in March or April, and we've seated to take a look into the user stories and what are the top user stories that we can deal without modifying a lot of the network policy, right? So it was like the port range and the namespace by name, and the biggest plus one was the cluster scoped network policy that you folks are working right now. But then we've started to look into, okay, how can we improve more and more the V1 network policy? And this was the first proposal that I did with Andrew and other folks, like, okay, let's start running in certain circles and see how can we improve this, right, with what we have. And I guess we are hitting the limit of how can we improve this without breaking anything. And this is not good because the API is stable. So about your question, yeah, I guess that everything that everyone said here is correct, but we are mostly hitting the limits of the extension of the current API. And like, you know about the Antria, and I know about Cilium and Calico, and every other CRD from those providers, they have specific things that we cannot add anymore in the network policy v1 object because it doesn't support this kind of extension, right? So I guess this is the main problem that I'm trying to solve here. Like, how can we improve the network policy API and improve the security experience for the cluster admin and also for the developer, but like maybe having a new object or not breaking a lot of stuffs. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah. I think it makes perfect sense.
So maybe we should just throw this up in the air and say, look, nobody's proposed anything yet. The first person to propose something that covers 80 or 70% of what people do with network policies will be the person who gets the gold star for the day, right, Ricardo? Like, if somebody wants to propose something crazy and stupid that might work, this is might be an interesting time the next few weeks to do that.
I think
if somebody gets interested in that, where should they post that? Or like just in Slack or something? Or
anyway, man, I guess show up to one of these and add it to the agenda. Let me or anyone else, Ricardo, anyone in here, just socialize it on Slack, and that's a way to start, right?
Cool.
Propose an API change or a CRD or a prototype or anything, really, because nobody's really proposed much yet, right?
Exactly. It's just like, how can we do this better right now, as we cannot move forward a lot with v1 network policy. What can, I guess, like the best analogy is that we wanna destroy a house to build a building, right? So we are just going to use the land and nothing else. So anything that's proposed here is going to be like something new. And I guess we can like make anything right now because we are proposing to evolve to right to a v2 thing. So anything is better than nothing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
On that front, I actually had a question for Satish, because I remember a couple of meetings ago we were reviewing the design for or proposal for the service selector. So I wonder if because we hit a lot of like obstacles when trying to add some new stuff into the v1 API. So I wonder if if we sort of like getting all those new things that we wanted to get together, can that be like the foundation for a new v2 API, or you guys you guys don't think that's a good idea?
I think
I think-
anything could be.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, so part of the reason is like, so we have service selectors and I think the service account selectors and probably something like endpoint selector. We haven't seen a lot of use cases, but probably like we will eventually end up having something like that. So, I mean, like we currently the network policy V1 has pod selected as a mandatory field. So eventually we're gonna move away from that. I think the only way is like having to move to a different API altogether, I think. So that's for the targets. Like, I mean, like if we are trying to apply a policy to a particular set of policies, like set of pods or like endpoints or services in future, that's the thing that we're looking at. So other cases, like if we are using as a peer, then we can actually get away with V1 itself, like adding a field under spec. So now spec has like pod selector, ingress and egress. So you can add ingress to service or egress to service or ingress to service account or egress to service account and not break the like, I mean, not fail open with the current API. But like I said, it makes it very easy to move to a new V2 API where we can actually solve everything. So I mean, it definitely makes sense to drive V2 agenda based on the new selectors that we are actually trying to introduce.
I mean, I think we basically have three things here right now. We have what you're bringing up, which is new types. We've got Matt's thing, which is a graphical representation of policies, or a node-based or a hierarchical type way of defining policies. And then we've got this other concept that people have thrown around of status, which is kind of an interesting thing, I think, also. Even though it's not backwards incompatible with V1, it's definitely a thing that isn't going to happen overnight. Like, we've got those three kind of almost orthogonal things, right? So maybe we could like take those three things and say those are. Is there anything else? Are there any other big ticket features that are missing?
So I guess the other thing is like logging, like whether to enable logging for a particular network policy or at a cluster level, things like that. So that could be one thing as well.
The default actions, the default action being default allow and not default deny, as an example.
Yeah.
From the selectors, the fail open theme, right?
Yeah, so maybe that's a way to do it, is that people can propose the bits and pieces that they're interested in, and maybe we'll have some kind of a Frankenstein's monster of like, here's like the ideal thing that has all the bells and whistles that we'd ever want.
So I don't know how they got populated on the network docs page, but there is a list that says what you can't do with network policies, at least not yet. And a lot of what we're talking about is in this list. There's a couple other items there as well. So that might also be a place to look. Yeah. I'm not sure where all that info was gathered from and sourced together, but obviously there's enough asks for people to put that there.
Yeah, that was me. I updated the page to have all those users. So we collected a bunch of user stories like 6 months ago, and so we didn't know what the hell to do with all those stories. So I made a docs PR to put them all on the docs page. But yeah, you're right. Like that would be another like place to start, I guess. So I mean, I think we've got like a few people here that are volunteering some thoughts. So Matt, if you want to distill down what you think could be done for like a hierarchical graph thing, and Satish and other folks want to do this stuff around statuses and logging and new types,
Yeah, sounds good.
I feel like we could probably start to sort of, starting from those from a high level, we could sort of start to think about like what we could do.
Sure.
But the approach from Yan from me is the most correct. Like, what are we trying to solve? So instead of getting all the user stories and say, okay, we want now login, we want now blah, we want now we want the actions. we are trying to solve the problem that we cannot expand anymore V1 network policy at all, and it have the problem of the full deny. So this is a good approach for me. And the extension relates to Satish proposals and to our proposals of like the Jay's complaints about not having the full action. So I guess this is a good start. Yeah. For me, sounds good.
So great.
Okay, folks.
Yeah. So if folks want to make individual docs or whatever and link to them, we can sort of start to aggregate them over time. But for now, it's
And I guess we can, like, if you have some time for the next week, we can take a look into what was proposed in like those 3 scenarios or 4 scenarios, and try to make some sort of brainstorm about that. Or if you think you prefer like to have like a more time, and I don't know, probably next week is code free, so probably some of us are going to be a little bit busy trying to close the PRs and got them merged, so we can also skip. So it's up to you. I will be here anyway. I will be on vacation, so I can help with anything. Okay. Okay, so I guess for today this is all. Anyone wants to say anything else? Otherwise, have a good week, folks. And 1 and 2 and 3. Have a nice week, folks.
bye everybody.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.
Yes, bye.